I'd been browsing the web late, as I usually do, chasing some random thrill or obscure story that would keep me awake for hours. Most people hear that and picture harmless forums or creepy YouTube videos. Maybe a story or two that gives you goosebumps and then fades. That's not what happened, not even close. What really happened was me, alone in my dark room, the glow of my monitor painting my face, and the screen clicking open a site that shouldn't exist. Everyone online had warned me. Don't go at 3 a.m. They said, it's not safe, but curiosity doesn't work with safety. Curiosity works with compulsion, with that itch at the back of your brain that screams, just one peek. The page loaded slowly, like it was deciding whether to let me see it. The cursor blinked, a heartbeat in the silence, and then the text appeared. Not typed out, not flashy, just words. A warning, leave now, do not return, do not stay, do not click further. Most people would have closed it immediately. Most people would have laughed it off, thinking it was a joke, some poorly executed prank by someone who wanted attention. But I clicked anyway, because ignoring instructions is easier when you tell yourself you're clever enough to handle it. The screen changed. At first it looked normal. Minimal design, stark text on a black background, nothing that seemed off. But then I noticed the cursor wasn't moving with my hand. It flickered on its own, drifting slowly toward links I hadn't hovered over. My skin prickled. The room felt colder, though the thermostat read 72 degrees. My computer fans whirred louder than usual, like something inside the tower was trying to warn me, or maybe screaming. I laughed nervously, trying to calm my rising panic. Rational explanations, a glitch, a virus, a weird coding error. But deep down, I already knew those weren't enough. Then the first image appeared. Not a normal image, not a photograph, not even a drawing, but something else. It looked like a window into a room I didn't recognize. The perspective was off, warped, as though someone had tilted the camera just slightly wrong. At the center of the frame, I could make out a shadow, a shape crouched in the corner. The weirdest thing was that it seemed to move subtly, curling tighter as I stared, as though sensing my gaze through the screen. I reached to move the mouse, closed the tab, shut everything down, but my fingers froze. My chest tightened. There was a sound from the speakers, almost inaudible, like a soft whisper, words I couldn't understand but felt on the inside of my skull. The whispers grew louder as I tried to back away. The page scrolled on its own, filling the screen with text that I didn't type. Words I couldn't comprehend at first, symbols that twisted and reshaped themselves as I tried to read. My throat went dry and my pulse spiked. It wasn't just the screen. My whole body was responding to something I couldn't see, couldn't rationalize. The warning had said, don't click further, don't stay, don't visit at 3 a.m. And here I was, frozen, unable to look away, unable to escape. A chat box appeared in the corner, empty at first, but then a line of text typed itself, letter by letter, you shouldn't be here. My hands shook as I tried to move the mouse, but the pointer jerked violently away. Another line appeared, we see you. I laughed, but it came out like a cough, hoarse and shaky. I told myself it was a clever hack, some prank that had gone too far. But that didn't stop my body from tensing, didn't stop the hairs on my arms from standing on end. Then I saw it, a reflection in my darkened monitor frame. I turned quickly, but my room was empty. Nothing there but the normal clutter of a late-night workstation. But the reflection on the screen, my own eyes staring back, didn't blink. I blinked, my reflection didn't. Something else in the corner of the reflection, something pale, moved closer. My heart slammed. I wanted to scream, to pull the plug, but the keyboard wouldn't respond. The keys were frozen beneath my fingers. Then came the next warning, typed across the screen in large red letters. Look away or lose more than time. My mind raced. Lose time. Lose what else? I felt a pressure in my chest, not physical, but mental, like the room itself was squeezing. The shadows behind me, the whispers in my ears, the cold creeping up my spine, they were all real. Or maybe real enough for my brain to register as real. My rational mind wanted an explanation, but the panic had already overridden it. The images shifted. Each new one was more disturbing, more impossible. Rooms I didn't recognize, shapes that shouldn't exist. Faces appeared, blank yet screaming. They stared at me through the screen, mouths moving soundlessly. My body jerked backward, finally freeing the mouse, but the cursor hovered over a link I hadn't clicked. And yet, the page opened it on its own. Text scrolled, faster now, almost a torrent. You're part of it now. You can't leave. You never left. I tried to turn off the computer. Nothing. The screen went black for a moment and then flickered back to life, showing something that made me almost fall out of my chair. My own room, exactly as it was, but empty. The window was open, when it shouldn't have been, and outside, the streetlights flickered in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And standing in the corner, faint in the shadows, a figure moved closer. Pale, lanky, too tall, its head tilted unnaturally. I don't remember how long I sat there, frozen, watching it inch forward through the reflection of the monitor. Time didn't exist. Everything felt slow and distorted. Then the whispers returned, louder, urgent, almost pleading. I leaned closer to the screen, heart hammering, my brain screaming at me to unplug, to run. But I couldn't. My eyes were locked, drawn to the impossible, to the figure that had somehow stepped through my reflection and into my awareness. A new message appeared, this time filling the entire screen. Don't leave, don't close, don't blink. You promised. I tried to speak. My voice cracked. No words came. The room grew colder. My vision tunneled. And then, without warning, the screen went black again. For a second, I felt relief, a wave of panic receding. But then, another whisper right in my ear, not through the speakers. You broke the rule. I jolted backward, finally yanking the plug from the wall. The monitor died, leaving only the reflection of my wide, terrified eyes in the dark window across the room. Silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. But the shape in the corner, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, they didn't vanish. They lingered in my mind, crawling under my skin, reminding me that some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. And that night, I learned a truth that no internet forum or urban legend could ever capture. The things online that warn you aren't jokes. Sometimes, they're the last chance you get to survive. I slept in the living room that night, lights on, phone by my side. The screen stayed dark, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure in the corner, saw the words flashing red. And when the clock struck 3 a.m. again, I realized that curiosity wasn't just dangerous, it was something that would follow me forever. The next day, I tried to convince myself it had been a nightmare, the result of too many late nights and too much caffeine. I scrolled through forums, reading the usual 3 a.m. internet warnings and creepypasta threads. Everyone had their tales, some elaborate hoaxes, some first-person stories meant to thrill, but nothing compared to what I had experienced. I didn't post anywhere. I didn't tell anyone in my life. How do you explain a shadow that exists only when your eyes meet a reflection? Whispers that aren't in the room, but inside your skull. Even writing it down made me shiver. I went through the day like a zombie. Every reflective surface made me flinch. The mirrors, my phone screen, even the water in my coffee mug seemed to flicker with movement that wasn't mine. My rational brain fought to assert itself. It whispered things like, it was a trick of the light, or you were sleep deprived. But every time I tried to focus, that cold dread came back, prickling my arms and neck. My apartment felt smaller, the shadows stretching longer than they should. And I realized the most terrifying part. Even with the screen off, even with the site closed, it hadn't left. By evening, I was trapped in a cycle. The computer sat in the corner, dark and silent, yet my eyes kept drifting toward it. The whispers returned, softer now, but unmistakable. Not through speakers, not through any device, but in the quiet space behind my consciousness. They were reminders, beckoning me to return, to finish what I started. Something inside me wanted to comply. Something told me that if I looked away for too long, I might lose access entirely or worse. I tried to sleep, but dreams were impossible. Each time I closed my eyes, the 3 a.m. site appeared behind my eyelids, scrolling impossibly fast, words bleeding into my mind. You shouldn't have come. Now it's watching. Shadows stretched across my room in the dream, and at the edge of perception, figures I didn't recognize slithered closer. I'd wake, heart hammering, sweat soaking my shirt, and the room would be silent, for a few minutes anyway. Then the whispers would start again, just soft enough to make me question reality. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I convinced myself that I had to understand it, to confront it. Curiosity, that old friend, whispered that if I could figure out what the site was, maybe I could end it. Maybe I could escape the feeling that it had followed me. At 2:50 a.m., I booted up my laptop, fingers shaking, heart racing. Every warning I had ignored before replayed in my mind, a litany of every don't I had ignored, but the pull was too strong. The page loaded instantly this time, faster than before, like it had been waiting. The black screen greeted me with text, calm and cold. You came back, good. We were wondering if you would. I didn't hesitate, I clicked through. Immediately the monitor flickered, images cascading in a way that made my stomach drop. Rooms I had never seen, geometries impossible to exist in the real world. Figures twisted and pale, and through them, glimpses of something that felt vaguely familiar. Shadows that moved like water. Whispers that now weren't just inside my head, they were in the room. I realized quickly that my reflection, the one that hadn't blinked, wasn't alone. Others were behind it. Pale faces stretched, some with features warped, their mouths opening in silent screams. I blinked. The reflections mimicked the blink but delayed, like they were learning, observing. My rational mind screamed, turn it off, run. But I couldn't. I was tethered to the screen by something older, something deeper than fear, fascination mixed with horror. A new message scrolled, taking over the whole screen. Do you see them now? They have seen you. You are ours to watch. My hands shook, and I tried to move the mouse again. Nothing. The keyboard was frozen, the computer entirely unresponsive, except for the text. Then came the first figure, crawling out of the reflection, stretching impossibly long arms toward me. Not fully corporeal, not fully shadow, it slithered across the desk, its movement liquid and jerky at the same time. I pulled back, hitting the chair, tripping over cables, heart racing so hard it threatened to burst my chest open. I stumbled to the doorway, trying to escape, but the door was gone. My room hadn't changed. I should have seen walls, furniture, but everything stretched, warped. The ceiling rose and fell in waves, the corners of the room bending toward me, edges smoothed like clay. The figures moved with it, sliding along warped planes. They were patient, precise, calculating. They weren't running at me, weren't screaming, they were learning how I moved, how I breathed, how I reacted. The whispers turned to speech. Not normal words, not in any language I knew, but tones and syllables that vibrated through my skull. I understood them perfectly, We know your fear, we know your curiosity, you belong. The words were inside my mind now, not spoken aloud. I tried to shake them out, tried to tell myself it was impossible, that this was my imagination. But even imagination didn't feel this real. Then a figure stepped fully out of the reflection. It was me, or something like me. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouth curling into a smile I would never wear. It mimicked my every movement, slower, exaggerated. When I reached to shut the monitor, it reached first, placing its hand over mine. Cold, solid, impossibly strong. My arm froze, my chest constricted. Panic flared so intensely I thought my lungs would collapse. The computer flickered again. This time text scrolled like handwriting across the screen. Do you understand? You were never safe. You never left. You are inside now, like all before you. I felt it then, a pull, not physical, but deeper, inside my head, like gravity bending reality toward the screen. I wanted to resist, to fight, but every muscle was heavy, every thought sluggish. I realized with a sinking terror that the warnings had never been about visiting at 3 a.m. They were about never leaving once you arrived. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. I don't know. Time no longer had meaning. The figures multiplied, creeping from every reflective surface. Mirrors, windows, even dark screens on other devices now gleamed with pale faces. The whispers were relentless, pulling me forward, urging compliance. And then, in the center of it all, my own reflection smiled again, and I understood. It had been waiting, learning, shaping me, preparing me for this. I don't remember how long I stared at that reflection. Minutes, hours. Time had fractured into something meaningless, a series of heartbeats and shallow breaths. Each flicker of the monitor, each movement in the corner of my eye, made my stomach churn. I wanted to run, wanted to scream, but my body refused. It was as though the longer I stayed, the heavier I became, sinking into some invisible weight that pressed down on my bones. Then the whispers changed. They no longer urged compliance. They mocked me. You thought you were clever. You thought you could see and leave. We are always here. We are inside now. The syllables wrapped around my thoughts like chains. My own name echoed, warped, drawn out in tones that set my teeth on edge. Something in the reflection leaned closer, smiling, stretching impossibly as if it had no spine at all. Its eyes were hollow, yet somehow piercing. They weren't looking at me, they were inside me. I tried to look away. I forced myself to close my eyes, hoping the darkness behind my eyelids would offer relief. But even that was gone. Behind my lids, the reflection persisted, flickering like a faulty light bulb. Its hand reached out toward me, its fingers curling into shapes that should have been impossible, stretching across the darkness of my vision. And then the whispering began again, but now it wasn't voices, it was knowledge, flooding my mind with things I didn't want to know. The secrets of the website, the history of those who had visited before me, the horror they had endured. It was relentless, overwhelming. In desperation, I lunged for the power cord, yanking it from the wall. The screen went black for a fraction of a second, and relief surged through me, but it was fleeting. When I blinked, the monitor lit again, though it wasn't connected to any power source. The room around me had changed. Shadows warped into impossible geometries, corners stretched into infinity, and the reflection no longer mimicked me, it was me. Or at least a perfect, horrifying version of me, stepping forward with predatory calm. I stumbled back, crashing into my desk, sending the laptop tumbling. The screen landed face up, lighting the ceiling with a pale, unnatural glow. That glow was enough. It illuminated a dozen figures, crawling from every reflective surface. Mirrors, my phone screen, the black TV in the corner, even the silvered bottom of my coffee mug. All of them pale, hollow-eyed, mouths twisted into silent screams. They moved like liquid, not bound by solid forms, sliding over desks, chairs, and walls, as though gravity had no power here. Panic seized me fully this time. I tried to run toward the door, but the room expanded and contracted at impossible angles. Every step I took stretched or compressed space, sending me spiraling toward shadows that reached out with long, distorted arms. I was screaming now, but the sound was swallowed immediately, as if the room itself consumed it. My voice echoed only inside my skull, alongside the whispers that now sounded like laughter. I tripped over something soft. My hand landed on the survivor, the mere reflection that had first approached me. Its skin was cold, slimy almost, and when I touched it, the flesh didn't resist. It wasn't human. I screamed, trying to wrench my hand back, but my arm was fused to it, drawn forward like I was a puppet. The reflection's head tilted toward me, eyes glinting with malice and intelligence. I understood without hearing the words. It wanted me, needed me, and it was patient. My phone buzzed. Somehow it had survived the chaos, and its screen lit with a notification from the website. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. The message was simple, clean, chilling. You can't leave. You are one of us now. My stomach dropped. I realized then that all the stories I had read about the 3 a.m. site, all the warnings online, they weren't exaggerations. They were instructions, a manual for the inevitable. Anyone who had come before me hadn't vanished by accident. They were claimed, assimilated, trapped in some looping nightmare where curiosity was currency and survival was impossible. I screamed again, wrenching backward, finally pulling my hand free. The reflection faltered, but only for a second. The others began moving faster, the liquid figures coalescing into shapes more solid, reaching higher, stretching thinner, bending around furniture to block every escape. My apartment, my sanctuary, had transformed into a labyrinth of horror. Mirrors no longer reflected the room, they projected it, distorted, twisted, filled with entities that were neither human nor entirely shadow. I had an idea. Desperation breeds creativity, and mine was fueled by pure fear. I grabbed the laptop and hurled it against the wall. The monitor shattered, sparks flying. The glow died, plunging the room into darkness. For a heartbeat, the room seemed empty. Relief surged, naive and fleeting. Then I heard the sound, unmistakable, the whispers, louder, more focused, circling me. The shattered glass on the floor shimmered. Reflections formed in the shards, and every single one of them grinned at me. Every piece of glass, every corner, every polished surface became a window for them to observe, to reach out. I ran. I don't know where I was going, only that I had to move. Doors warped in and out of place, hallways twisted impassably. I passed by walls that breathed, pulsing like lungs, and mirrors that weren't mirrors, but portals showing places I hadn't been. Whispers filled the air, telling me to stop, to comply, to surrender. My own name repeated endlessly, drawn out, distorted, as though the world had learned to speak it differently than I had ever known. Eventually, I found myself in a room that seemed familiar, yet entirely alien. My bedroom, but stretched, twisted, filled with reflections that weren't my own. In the center, the website appeared again on a floating screen, hovering in midair without wires, without power. The same black page, same white text. You shouldn't have come, but now that you are here, you belong. The whispers coalesced into speech. This time, I understood the message completely. It wasn't just a website. It was a trap, a predator, a place where curiosity and fear met to ensnare the unwary. And then I understood the truth. The reflections, the whispers, the shifting room, they weren't attacking me. They were me. Every fear, every hesitation, every impulse that led me here had been absorbed and manifested. I was trapped in my own mind, guided by the sight, guided by something ancient, something patient, something hungry. The horror wasn't outside. It was within, and it had been waiting for me the entire time. I backed away from the floating screen, but no matter how far I moved, the room seemed to stretch endlessly. The floor beneath me rippled like water, each step sending tremors through the distorted space. The walls pulsed with shadowed forms, faint outlines of figures that moved against the warped angles of my bedroom. The whispers returned, layered now, overlapping, almost like a chorus chanting in a language I couldn't comprehend but instinctively feared. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to think. Logic, even in the face of terror, was the only thing keeping me from losing everything. I grabbed the nearest reflective surface, a shard from the broken monitor, and held it before me like a shield. The surface rippled, and I caught a glimpse of myself, but it wasn't me. The reflection wore my face, my expression, yet it moved independently, smiling cruelly, twisting its head to mock me. I recoiled, the shard trembling in my hand. My own eyes stared back, filled with fear, yet somehow alive in a way I wasn't. The whispers escalated, now sharper, more insistent. You can't hide. You are ours. Always ours. Each syllable vibrated through my skull, pressing on my temples until I felt blood behind my eyes. The shard I held began to distort, the reflection melting into a grin so wide it shouldn't have been possible. Teeth like shards of glass glinting in the dim, warped light. I dropped it. It clattered across the floor, but when it hit the ground, it didn't shatter. Instead, it floated upright, a perfect miniature of the floating screen, and from it, the whispers grew louder, more focused, targeting me directly. I ran, my bare feet slipping across the warped floor, past walls that seemed to breathe and twist around me. The furniture stretched and compressed, blocking my path, then disappearing, replaced by impossible geometries that mocked my memory of the room. Every corner I turned held a new horror, reflections of me, each one slightly wrong, moving in ways my body couldn't, gesturing toward me, beckoning, taunting. The whispers had become a voice, singular now, resonant, dripping with menace. We are patient. You will learn. You will become. I stumbled into what looked like my closet, hoping for a momentary refuge. The door creaked closed behind me, but the relief was fleeting. The walls of the closet were lined with mirrors, dozens of tiny reflections, all staring at me with hollow eyes. In one, I saw myself stepping out of the closet, even as I sat pressed against the back wall. In another, I saw my own face being pulled apart by hands that weren't mine. I pressed my palms to my ears, trying to block the sound, but the whispers were inside me now, not just outside. They were in my mind, echoing my fears back at me, amplifying every memory, every regret, every hesitation that had brought me here. I realized then that there was no escape. Not from the website, not from the reflections, not from the whispers. Each step I had taken, each decision to click, to stay, to look, had led me to this inevitable moment. My own curiosity had been the trap. I thought I was clever, that I could handle a challenge at 3 a.m., that I could laugh at warnings. But the website had known me long before I had arrived. It had waited, patient, feeding on every story I had read, every thrill I had sought. And now it was here, inside me, around me, controlling everything I could see, hear, and think. A new sensation prickled my skin, like thousands of invisible fingers crawling over me, probing, searching. I flinched, jerking backward, but there was nowhere to go. The closet had expanded impossibly, becoming a labyrinth of mirrors, reflections, and shifting shadows. Each mirror reflected a different version of me, each one more twisted than the last. One smiled as it ripped at its own face. Another laughed silently, eyes glinting with malice. A third whispered my secrets, the things I had never told a soul. the darkest parts of myself laid bare. I understood now. The website didn't just trap you physically or digitally. It trapped your mind, your essence. Every reflection, every whisper, every impossible shadow was part of it. It consumed curiosity, transformed it into fear, and then multiplied that fear until it became a cage. I could fight, I could scream, I could try to escape, but it didn't matter. The website was infinite, eternal, patient, and it had already won. In desperation, I did the only thing I could think of. I forced myself to sit, breathing slowly, counting the seconds, focusing on something tangible. My own heartbeat, the pressure of my hands against my knees, the temperature of the floor beneath me. I told myself I was still me, that no matter what the reflections or whispers said, I existed. And for a fleeting second, that clarity was enough. The whispers faltered. The reflections paused, as if confused by the defiance of a mind that refused to bend completely. But the reprieve was brief. One mirror trembled, and from it a hand reached out. Not a reflection, not a trick of the light, something solid, wet and cold, curling around my wrist. I screamed, yanking backward, but the hand didn't let go. More followed, reaching from every reflective surface, dragging me toward the glass. The whispers crescendoed, a chorus of triumph and menace, promising an eternity of torment. My mind spun with images of previous visitors, trapped, screaming silently, dissolving into reflections, becoming part of the endless cycle. I kicked, I struggled, I fought with everything I had, but it was like fighting water. Every movement met resistance, multiplied, dragging me closer to the mirrors. I screamed my own name, hoping to anchor myself to reality, to remind myself that I was still human, still alive. The hands slowed, hesitated, and then released. I fell backward, gasping, eyes wide, heart hammering. The mirrors around me rippled, and I understood that I had survived only because I refused to surrender completely. I scrambled from the closet, into the hallway that was now impossibly long and warped. The whispers followed, fading slowly, retreating, but never gone. Every reflection along the walls watched me, tracking me, waiting for the moment I faltered again. I knew now that the website's power wasn't bound by screens or time. It was everywhere, always watching, always patient. One misstep, one lapse in focus, and it would reclaim me, fold me into its infinite reflection, and erase me from the world I knew. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard normal sounds. A car passing outside, a dog barking, the faint hum of electricity. I ran toward them, toward anything that reminded me of reality, of life. Each step was agony, each reflection a temptation to look, to give in, to surrender to the impossible horror that pursued me. I stumbled through the front door into the cool night, gasping, shivering, and collapsing onto the grass. The whispers had faded, but I knew they weren't gone. They were patient, waiting, always watching. I didn't look back, I didn't run, I didn't speak. I just sat there, trembling under the stars, knowing that I had cheated something ancient, something patient. Something that would be waiting for me the next time I was curious, the next time I was foolish enough to click. The website wasn't just a site. It was a predator. It was eternal, and it had chosen me. The night air did little to calm me. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car horn, every whisper of the wind seemed amplified, echoing the chaos still locked in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirrors, the shadows, the hands, the whispers, they had followed me somehow. My apartment looked normal, but I could feel the edges of reality bending, subtle, almost imperceptible. The clock ticked too slowly, the lights flickered like breathing, and every reflective surface held a promise of that same impossible horror waiting to reach out again. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I had escaped. But logic, that fragile tether to sanity, was failing. Each shadow in the corners of my vision seemed to pulse with intent. The whispers returned, soft, almost playful this time, like a predator circling before striking. Curiosity is a gift. Curiosity is a curse. You belong to us now. I tried to block it, turned away from every reflective surface, avoided mirrors, even the small glass on my phone screen. But the whispers persisted, faint at first, then growing louder, more insistent, until they became a constant drone inside my skull. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining the floating screens, the hands, the reflections reaching for me. Every shadow in the room seemed to stretch unnaturally, twisting toward me, and I could swear the whispers were now synchronized with my heartbeat. My phone buzzed a notification from an app I hadn't opened in months. I tried to ignore it, but something compelled me to look. On the screen, a single line of text appeared. "We see you." Panic surged. I threw the phone across the room, but it didn't hit the floor. It hovered inches above the carpet, the screen glowing, displaying a live feed of my bedroom from an impossible angle. I could see myself lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling, but not really me. This reflection moved independently, smiled cruelly, and then waved. The room began to warp around me, walls bending, floor folding upward, and I realized there was no longer a distinction between my apartment and the website, between reality and the digital nightmare. I was trapped in both. The feed changed. The room was now endless, mirrors stacked upon mirrors, creating infinite corridors of myself. I ran along them, but each step duplicated, multiplied, until I was surrounded by dozens of versions of me, all screaming, all reaching for freedom, all failing. The whispers became voices, speaking in unison, mocking, promising, "You will join us. There is no end." I could feel something brushing my skin, dragging across my limbs, unseen but undeniably present. In desperation, I tore at the fabric of my own reality. I smashed mirrors, shattered glass, anything reflective, hoping that by breaking them I could sever the connection. But every shard floated back into place, perfectly whole, as if mocking my efforts. The reflections didn't disappear. They grew stronger, sharper, more vivid. Hands reached out from every broken fragment, pulling, tugging, insisting, dragging me toward the endless mirrored corridors. I screamed, and it felt like the sound didn't leave me, didn't echo outside, but remained inside, amplifying the terror, feeding it, until it became unbearable. My lungs burned. My mind screamed for rationality, for logic, for escape. But I realized there was none. The website had no rules, no boundaries, no mercy. Every choice I had made to click, to stay, to watch, had been anticipated, predicted, and exploited. My fear was no longer a reaction, it was the very essence of the trap. Then something shifted. The reflections stilled, the whispers paused, and the air seemed to hum with an expectant silence. From the farthest corner of the endless mirrored corridor, a single reflection stepped forward. It wasn't a twisted version, not a cruel mockery. It was me, perfect, calm, and terrifyingly aware. Its eyes locked with mine, and in that gaze I felt every secret I had ever hidden, every regret, every fear laid bare. It spoke not with words, but with understanding, with intent. To survive, you must give us something. Your fear, your pride, your curiosity. Choose or be consumed. I realized the truth. The website didn't just trap people. It thrived on them. It needed them, and it didn't want me dead. Not yet. It wanted control, dominance, a willing participant in its eternal game. To refuse was to perish. To comply was to lose myself. I had no choice but to act. I focused on my heartbeat, forcing calm, grounding myself. I acknowledged my fear, my panic, my shame. I named it, embraced it, let it fill the mirrored corridor without fighting. The reflections recoiled slightly, the whispers faltered, and for the first time I felt a measure of power. Not over the website, not over the horror, but over my own response. I was not yet a victim, not entirely. Then I remembered something, the shard, the broken monitor I had first tried to use as a shield. I grabbed it from the floor, remembering the resistance, the floating, the imperfection of reality bending around it. I focused all my will, all my intent into that shard. The reflections and whispers pressed closer, but I held firm, willing the shard to act as a boundary, a wedge between myself and the infinite corridor. The shard pulsed with light, bright and piercing, and the reflections recoiled. The whispers screamed, a cacophony of frustration and rage. I held the shard high, and the mirrored corridor began to collapse inward, folding, twisting, unraveling like a thread pulled from a tapestry. Hands vanished, shadows dissipated, and the oppressive weight on my mind lifted slightly. The website fought, resisted, but the shard held firm, a focal point of my defiance, a reminder that even in the face of infinite horror, the mind could exert power. Slowly, the room returned, recognizable, solid. The walls were straight, the floor unmoving, the lights steady. My phone lay dead, screen black, the whispers gone. My reflection in the shard now mirrored my relief, my exhaustion, my raw survival. I collapsed to the floor, body trembling, heart racing, tears streaming. I had survived, but I knew that survival was temporary. The website would wait. It would return, always. I learned a lesson that night, a lesson burned into my consciousness. Curiosity is dangerous. Fear is a tool, and the digital world holds horrors far beyond our comprehension. The website had tested me, reshaped me, left me changed. And I knew deep down that the next time curiosity called, the choice might not be mine to make. The following days were a blur. I went through the motions of life, eating, sleeping, working, but every reflective surface, every flicker of a screen, every small noise made my pulse spike. The shard I had used to push back the website remained on my desk, an object of both protection and obsession. I couldn't leave it, not even for a moment, and yet its presence was a constant reminder of the power the site still held over me. Even now, writing this, I can feel the pull, a subtle tug at the edges of my perception, a whisper at the back of my mind. We are waiting. We are patient. I tried to reach out to friends, to confide in someone, but the words never came out right. How do you explain something that doesn't exist in their reality? How do you tell them a website, a digital construct, could manipulate your very perception of space and time, could trap you in infinite mirrored corridors, and force you to face versions of yourself that weren't real, but felt undeniably true? No one would understand. They would think I was insane, and maybe I was. The lines between sanity and madness had been blurred, stretched, and torn apart in those long, torturous hours. Sleep remained impossible. Every attempt to close my eyes was met with flashes of mirrors, shadows, hands, reflections, all pressing against me. My dreams were no longer mine. They had become extensions of the website itself. I would wake in cold sweats, heartbeat hammering, gasping for air, as if some invisible force had been constricting my lungs. And in the quiet moments of morning, when the world seemed normal and safe, I could still hear the faintest whispers, a reminder that the game was far from over. I began to research obsessively. Hours turned into days, days into weeks. I scoured forums, old archives, abandoned websites, anything that could shed light on the phenomenon I had encountered. But every thread ended in frustration. Mentions of the site were rare, vague, often dismissed as myths or urban legends. Those who claimed to have experienced it themselves often vanished soon after posting. And yet, the patterns were unmistakable. The warnings about 3 a.m., the way curiosity was exploited, the inevitability of the trap. It was a predator with patience, intelligence, and an almost supernatural understanding of human psychology. In my research, I discovered references to others who had survived encounters, rare, almost impossibly so. They spoke of the same tactics, whispers in the dark, mirrored corridors, hands reaching from impossible angles, the need to embrace fear rather than fight it. Each survivor had one thing in common. They wielded some object of their own will, a focus point, a talisman against the site's pull. My shard, I realized, was not unique. The site thrived on testing, on pushing people to the brink, and it respected the strength of will when properly focused. But it was temporary. The moment that focus faltered, the site could, and would, reclaim its prey. I couldn't let that happen. I set up my defenses meticulously. No unnecessary screens, no mirrors, no reflective surfaces in the rooms I frequented. The shard remained close at hand at all times, a touchstone of reality, a lifeline against the encroaching digital nightmare. I avoided the internet almost entirely, limiting exposure to only necessary work and essential communication. Even then, I took extreme precautions, using secure systems and never visiting unfamiliar sites. The fear was constant, a low hum beneath every thought, but it was manageable. I had learned to coexist with the presence of something that should not exist, and yet curiosity persisted. It is, after all, one of the most human traits, and the website preyed upon it with perfection. I found myself drawn to fragments of the story, to snippets of rumors, to mentions of the site in hidden corners of the web. Each time I resisted, I felt a surge of relief, but the pull never truly left. It lingered, patient, waiting for a moment of weakness, and I knew deep down that the next person who stumbled upon the site would not be so fortunate. The warnings were real, and the consequences were far beyond anything the average mind could comprehend. One night, weeks later, I had a dream, not a nightmare this time, but a vision. I was back in the mirrored corridors, but this time I was not alone. Shadows moved in patterns I recognized. Reflections shifted in ways that reminded me of the first moments of the encounter. But I was calm. I held the shard firmly, guiding my reflections, navigating the corridors with precision. The whispers spoke, but I did not falter. And then, at the center of it all, I saw a figure, a new presence, hesitant, trembling, curiosity written across its form. The website had found a new target. I reached out, using the shard as a bridge between the real and the virtual, and I whispered words of warning. Do not click, do not follow, do not listen. The figure hesitated, and for a moment I saw the possibility of salvation. But then the figure's eyes caught a glint of something impossible, a shimmer of light that promised knowledge, power, experience beyond the ordinary. The pull was irresistible. The website had learned, adapted. The cycle was eternal. I woke with a start, sweat pouring, heart racing. The shard sat beside me, unyielding, its glow faint but steady. The whispers were gone, but the knowledge remained. The website was not a single entity, it was a force, a predator, an intelligence. It adapted, evolved, and it waited. Always. And those of us who survived were only temporary victors, guardians of a secret too dangerous to share. I have since chosen isolation in certain ways, careful navigation in others. I document my experience in private, knowing the risk of exposure is too high. Yet I write this not for fame nor for attention, but as a warning. Curiosity is not a trivial flaw, it is a weapon. And in the wrong hands at the wrong time, it becomes the gateway to horrors that defy understanding. The shard remains my companion, my anchor to reality. A reminder that survival is not a birthright, but a hard-won achievement. I know that one day, curiosity will find me again, or someone else will fall into the same trap. The website will wait, patient and eternal, and when it strikes again, it will be merciless, relentless, and perfect in its execution. If you are reading this, heed my warning. There are doors that should never be opened, places that should remain unexplored, and websites that should never be visited at 3 a.m. The line between curiosity and obsession is thin, and on the other side lies something that does not play by the rules of reality. Something that waits, watches, and learns from every step you take. Something that can reach through screens, mirrors, reflections, and whispers to claim your very perception of the world. Do not test it. Do not dare it. And if you ever feel the urge to click, to follow, to investigate, remember this: the website is patient, it is intelligent, it does not forgive, it does not forget, and it does not tire. You may survive once, twice, but every interaction strengthens it. Every click feeds the predator, and every whisper in the dark is a promise of the horrors to come. I survived, only barely, and I know with certainty that next time someone else might not. The internet told me never to visit this website at 3 a.m. I didn't listen, I survived, but the cost was higher than anyone could imagine.